A lot of people still believe that burnout is because of a busy workload. And there are so many other things that contribute to burnout. And today I want to talk about some of the hidden causes behind burnout beyond just a heavy workload. I am Michelle, and I've been through burnout myself a few years ago. It's been quite a long journey, but I am fully recovered now and on the other side of it all. Through the same time as burnout, I was going through menopause, I quit drinking, and I had a bunch of different life challenges going on as well. And I've been blogging my journey in the hope that it helps anyone else going through similar things to feel seen, encouraged, understood, and hopeful. So let's talk about the hidden causes of burnout beyond a busy workload. Burnout is often misunderstood as simply having too much work, but the causes of burnout are usually a lot more complicated than that. Workload can definitely play a role, but internal pressures, life circumstances, emotional patterns, and misaligned values can all contribute. A few years ago now, in early 2021, I hit what I now recognize as stage 12 of burnout, and I was completely empty and depressed, even though my life seemed good on the outside, perhaps even enviable to some people. When I wasn't crying, I was on the verge of tears, and I was stuck in a constant state of emotional exhaustion. And this exhaustion was so deep that I felt like my body had given up, and I was emotionally drained in ways that I just couldn't fully explain. I knew I hadn't got there overnight, but I had no idea how or when things had spiraled to quite that extent. And in the aftermath, I did what I always do. I researched. I needed an explanation. In my Googling, I discovered the 12 stages of burnout, and I traced my journey across them so that I could identify when I reached each stage. And I've done a little video about that a couple of videos ago. I'll share a link in the description. So my goal by doing that was to understand how I got there, in the hope that it would help me figure out how to get back out again, and more importantly, how to avoid ever getting back there again. The first time reaching stage 12 was a really painful wake-up call. I'd ignored the warning signs for far too long. But years later, even after making significant changes in my life, I found myself heading back there and hovering around stages 9 or 10 again. But this time I felt different. Things looked a bit different. I wasn't drinking anymore, so there was no more drinking to blackout going on. And some of the physical symptoms had resolved, but there were others that had reappeared. I was better, but still not great at managing my boundaries. And I was in a less stressful role, and the workload was manageable. I wasn't in complete collapse, but those familiar feelings in my mind and body told me that burnout was lurking nearby. And it was during that time that a friend of mine made a comment to me that just really stuck with me. He said, "How can you be burnt out if your job isn't that busy?" And it made me realize just how misunderstood burnout is. According to the World Health Organization, burnout is an occupational phenomenon characterized by emotional exhaustion, mental distance from work, and reduced professional efficacy. In other words, burnout is much more than workload alone. Burnout is a complex, multifaceted experience shaped by both internal and external factors. And I want to share some of those factors now with you, not just from what I've researched, but from what I've lived myself. The inner taskmaster. So when good enough is never enough. One of the biggest contributors to my burnout was my inner taskmaster, a part of me that developed as a coping mechanism during childhood, apparently, according to my therapist. For years, it drove me to overachieve, to work harder, faster, better, believing that if I could just stay in control, everything would be okay. But the taskmaster didn't know when to stop. Even when I wasn't that busy by conventional standards, the taskmaster made everything feel urgent and overwhelming. Small tasks became monumental, and I would feel internal panic, like I needed to move faster and stay on top of everything, or I'd fall behind, even just little things. It wasn't until I did some deep work, including a therapy session focused on internal family systems, and I'll do another video in the future that talks about that in more detail, that I started to understand this part of myself. And the taskmaster wasn't evil, it was just trying to protect me. But it had become so relentless that it wasn't letting me breathe. So another one, misaligned values, when your work no longer feeds your soul. For many years, I worked hard, I poured my heart into my job, and I was proud of what I'd accomplished. But somewhere along the way, the work I was doing no longer aligned with who I was becoming. I wanted to focus on mental health and well-being, and I wanted to create meaningful change in people's lives. But my day-to-day tasks with my day job were pulling me in a very different direction. Burnout doesn't just happen when you're overworked. It can also happen when you're working on things that feel meaningless or disconnected from your core values. When you spend years giving your all to something that just no longer resonates, it's like trying to pour water into a bottomless cup. You give and you give, but it never ever feels like enough. Another one, lack of recognition when your efforts go unseen. So burnout thrives in environments where your hard work goes unnoticed or underappreciated. I've had moments in my career where I felt invisible, where the blood, sweat and tears that I put into projects didn't seem to matter, or having a whole year's worth of work completely scrapped. After years of giving my best, it was really disheartening to feel like no one really even noticed and nothing that I did seemed to make much of a difference. And this lack of recognition can really chip away at your motivation and self-worth, and you start to wonder, why am I even doing this? Personal challenges when life outside of work takes a toll. So burnout is not just about work. It's also shaped by personal challenges. Family responsibilities, caregiving duties, or health issues can take an emotional toll and deplete the energy and capacity that you have left to give at work. For me, supporting various family members in some difficult situations added another layer of responsibility and emotional strain. For others, it might be raising children or dealing with personal health struggles. When these challenges start to pile up, they compound the mental and physical exhaustion, making burnout a lot more likely. So passion projects can be a double-edged sword. They're meant to bring joy and fulfillment, but when you take on too many, they can become another source of pressure. I'd taken on so many passion projects, ironically mostly related to workplace mental health and well-being, that I made myself really busy, even though my actual job, my day job at the time, wasn't excessively demanding. So this type of self-imposed busyness can be deceiving. From the outside, it might look like you're overburdened, but internally it can feel like you're constantly just juggling too much. Passion doesn't necessarily protect you from burnout if it's not balanced. Another one, trauma and unresolved emotional baggage. Burnout is not just about the present. It's often rooted in the past. For me, unresolved trauma played a really significant role. That inner taskmaster kept me in overdrive. That wasn't born out of nowhere. It was a response to chaos and instability during my early years. Trauma can create patterns of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and the fear of failure. Even when you logically know you're doing enough, there's a part of you that's afraid to slow down. And quitting drinking was one of the ways that I began to face this head on. I realized that alcohol had been a form of escape, numbing the discomfort that I didn't want to confront, and letting go of it forced me to truly face my emotional baggage and really start healing. Ignoring physical warning signs when your body tells the truth. Burnout doesn't just live in the mind, it shows up in the body. For years, I ignored lots of physical signs. Persistent fatigue, brain fog and inability to focus, digestive issues, muscle tension, nerve pain. I had this strange sciatic kind of pain. I had all sorts of tension and muscular kind of nerve pain things. Heart palpitations, 3-day migraines, poor sleep. I convinced myself that I could push through, that rest wasn't an option, but the body often knows before the mind even does. Burnout isn't just mental exhaustion, it's physical depletion. And learning to listen to my body has been one of the most valuable lessons in my recovery. And I now pay attention to the early warning signs and I take action before things escalate. And then there's emotional exhaustion when you're always on. Even when I wasn't working, my mind didn't stop. I was constantly on, thinking about the next task, the next responsibility, the next thing I needed to fix. And there was no space to truly rest. Emotional exhaustion is often overlooked, but it's a major contributor to burnout. You can't recharge if your brain is always running in the background like an app that never closes. And one of the most important changes I made was learning to give myself permission to rest, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and sometimes even socially, especially when I had nothing left in the tank. So rebuilding after burnout, there's quite a bit that I've learned. Recovering from burnout isn't something that you can achieve just by taking a break or reading about it. It requires much deeper work, whether through therapy, self-reflection, lifestyle changes, or confronting the patterns that led you there in the first place. I've had many setbacks and moments where I felt like I was slipping back into old patterns, and it still happens even today. But I've also learned a lot along the way. It's okay to slow down. Rest isn't laziness, it's necessary. I still have to keep reminding myself of that sometimes. Your worth isn't tied to productivity. You're enough, even when you're not doing. And boundaries, I know it sounds cliche, everyone talks about boundaries, but they are absolutely essential. Learning to say no, both to others and to myself sometimes, has been life-changing. Burnout taught me that healing requires a lot more than just taking time off work. It requires understanding the deeper patterns and the causes of burnout, addressing the root causes, the root issues, and creating a life that aligns with who you truly are. If you're listening to this and feeling like burnout is knocking on your door, I want you to know that you are not alone. Burnout is not a sign of weakness. It's a signal that something really needs to change. And change is possible. I am living proof of that. And if you want to see my whole blog, I've been sharing my journey for quite a while now. You can find me at nostosnest.com. I'll share a link in the description. Thanks.